The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're coming to you live from the Warner Center in Woodland Hills, California. This is the home for Autism Live. It is also the home for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Thrilled to be here with you on this Monday morning. We've got a big show planned for you. I want to remind you that we're on this new schedule Monday through Friday, and we hope that you guys are liking it and that you're finding it more interactive, because we're trying to make it more interactive. So in any case, we want to show you some of the different ways that you can participate with us so that you can be more interactive. While Traven is showing you a bunch of those different sites and ways to connect with us, I want to remind you that our homepage is autism-live.com. When you go there, lots of things to do. The website looks new. Make sure that you're checking it out and giving us your feedback, because we really want it to be user-friendly for you. You may notice that after you get on the website, a pop-up will come up asking you if you want to subscribe. And really all that does, if you fill out that information, it stays internal with us, and it gives us the ability to send out your viewing postcard at the beginning of the week so that you know who's going to be on which day and what's happening, so that you'll never miss anything. The only other time we have used it is when we have somebody big, like sometimes we have Temple Grandin on and it's a very last minute thing and she says, I can do it right now. And we want for her to be able to answer your questions, so we'll put out an alert saying, you know, we're about to go on with Temple Grandin. Does anybody want to tune in and ask questions live, you know? So, but it's really important to me, we don't abuse when you give us your information. So I would encourage you to subscribe. If you don't want to, just click the X and it'll go away. Do want to remind you, if you want to chat on the live site, all you have to do is go to the chat at the bottom of the page, open it up, and you can chat away. All right, I always like to remind you that we have a lot of experts that are on this show. I'm not one of them. I'm a mom, an autism mom, a former teacher. I'm somebody who cares very passionately about you getting the resources that you need. And when I say you, I mean you. Whether you are a parent, a teacher, a practitioner, an individual who's on the autism spectrum, or somebody who loves somebody who's on the autism spectrum, I want you to get to the resources that you need. It does not matter to me whether you are 2 days old or whether you are about to be 200. Well, I guess it does matter to me, but it doesn't change my desire to help you. I have karmic debt to pay down, let's be honest, because my son got the support that he needed that was right for him at the right time, and they put up with me while we were doing it. And let's face it, I'm a handful. So, you know what I'm saying? So I have, and I know a lot of parents feel this way, I have something to give back, and I need to find more ways to give back. So, you know, I say, let's hold hands, si se puede. We can do this together. And you don't have to do it alone. So feel free to write in whenever you have questions. The other thing at the start of the show that we like to do, especially on Mondays and Thursdays, is something that we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what are they talking about and why do they have to use these terms, especially the acronyms. Save me from the acronyms, right? And today we're taking on one of the biggest ones that's going to be important to you. And by the way, this is why we do this a little bit at a time, one word at a time, because when you know these terms, when you know them and they're yours, they are powerful. Let me just tell you. And this one, I think, is one of the most powerful ones that there is. It's FAPE, F-A-P-E, and people refer to it as FAPE. And you will hear at your school, they will say, well, you got your offer of FAPE. So knowing what this is, whoo, powerful. And knowing when and how to wield this so that it's on your side, amen. So let's go, let's take a look at the actual definition, and then we're going to give you a more working definition. So FAPE stands for free, appropriate public education, a term frequently referred to in IEPs. So, and let's go on to our working definition here. FAPE is what your child is legally entitled to in the United States. But let's go, if your child has a diagnosis, you are entitled to an IEP, and in the IEP, the school will make you an offer of FAPE. It is what they are saying is your free, appropriate public education. So let's go back to that actual definition for a second, Traven. So let's break it down. Free means it's not going to cost you anything. Woohoo, right? Because I know in the beginning when your child, listen, when my son was diagnosed, I was like, what will become of us? Because I have $4.44 in my bank account, right? And he's going to need things. And I didn't know that my child absolutely got to go to school. That is the law of the land. If they are telling you that your child can't go to school, then they have to provide a school where your child can go to school. Because everyone is entitled to a free, appropriate public education. So the free part we get, we understand free, right? Don't be fooled. Somebody tells you got to pay for something. Where's my FAPE? Where's my free appropriate public education, right? I'm going to bypass appropriate for a second to go to public. That means that, you know, you are entitled for your child to have a placement at a school. And if they can't do it publicly, they have to pay for them to do it privately. Okay? And education, we all know what that is, but you know what? That's under question right now, and I'll come back to that. Let's go back to appropriate. So this is for the longest time been the word that people dig in and about have the biggest arguments about. What's appropriate, right? And what's appropriate for my child is not going to be what's appropriate for your child, which is not going to be appropriate for the person down the road. This is why it's called an IEP, an individualized education plan. So appropriate is usually where your argument is. Education, a little bit now, because the Supreme Court has ruled that de minimis is no longer appropriate. De minimis means the minimum, like basically parking your kid in a classroom and saying we can't teach them. The Supreme Court has ruled, that's not appropriate. So, I don't know what just happened on the screen. But in any case, I want you to be thinking about this because we're going to be talking with Bonnie Yates in just a little while. Free appropriate public education. There's so much more to learn about what IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, has to say about this. But if you just know free and appropriate, man, and they've got to educate them. That's a long way, because sometimes schools will try to convince you that this means something other than what it is. Free appropriate public education for all. And it's for us to hang our hats to. Now, we always have a question of the day. Did we just see the question? Were we seeing a tease of the question, or was that something else? I'm waiting with bated breath to see our question today. Bum, ba, da, bum. It's making me wait. Okay, where would you like to visit? And it has to be some place that you've never been. So where in the world would you like to go? You know, the where in the world is Carmen Sandiego. Well, where in the world would you like to go? If you could go anywhere, where would you like to visit? Somebody asked me this the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I would whittle it down. We just traveled and we went to Boston for a week. We're just back now a little over a week. And I love to see new things. I love to go new places. I love to meet the people. I just hate the travel. Where's the teleport? If I could teleport, I think first thing up for me, I want to go to Scotland. Now that I know that I'm Scottish. All these years I thought with the name Shannon, which is the family last name that I come from, we thought that we were Irish. Turns out we are from Northern Ireland because we emigrated there from Scotland. Who knew? And there are castles in Scotland that my relatives built. So, and then we did my husband's genealogy, and guess what? He's Scottish too. So we were really jonesing to go to Scotland and see some castles and take our kid and show him what his lineage is. But where would you go? Where would you go? And why? What would you see when you're there? but hopefully someplace that you haven't been to before, because let's make it exciting. All right, I'm running through things because we got so much to do in the show today, but we always have a topic of the week, and our topic this week, are you ready for this? Bum, ba, da, ba. And we'll talk about this a little bit today and more later out throughout the week. Defining and living your priorities. You know, it's come to my attention through being in the autism world that you can be moving along and just getting through every day. And then something happens that sort of, bumps you, like, kind of getting side hit by a car, T-boned. And all of a sudden it's like, what's important, right? And autism certainly did that to my family, but we've had other events that have done that to my family and friends. And when people talk about what are the gifts of when something happens that you hadn't expected, something that often is difficult, I know there are a lot of you who are watching who are like, please don't talk about the gifts of autism because I'm not seeing it. I will tell you that that's something that comes later with perspective, but now having been in the autism community for over a decade, I can tell you that one of the things that I've learned from autism is that it's important to be looking at what's important to you and am I doing it? And I forget on a weekly basis and then have to step back and reevaluate and go, wait a second, what's important to me, and is that what my actions are in alignment with? And there are times that I look back in my life and I go, wow, I was really happy then. And you know what I find? That it's because there was something that I was working towards and my actions were aligned with what I wanted to be doing. And when it gets a little off, it gets really, really hard. And I think it's really easy with autism to get off track, to get caught up in the fight, to get so angry with an entity, whether it's a school or your insurance company or whoever, or the person who's not showing up for you to be a part of the team to do the thing that you want to do. It's easy to get caught up in that, and that becomes what you're living. And yet that's not what your priority is. It's just something that's happening in addition to what's happening. So we're going to talk a little bit about this, and I'm going to be asking you guys to think about this. Try this on for size. What are your priorities right now? And is that what you're doing? And how does that feel if you're not? Because it doesn't feel good for me. It really doesn't. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. But today on the show, I want, and I'm hurrying to get to her, we have Bonnie Yates, the amazing Bonnie Yates. She's a special education attorney. She is also an amazing mom in every sense of that word. And we're going to be joined by her in just a few minutes. She's going to be answering your questions a little bit later on. We're going to, I hope, have time for a mindfulness moment where we'll talk a little bit about setting priorities. And hopefully we'll have time for an autism in the classroom moment. So that plus your questions coming up. Stick with us.
Hi, I'm Lisa Ackerman. Welcome back to Talk of Facts. We hear questions all the time, and we want to give you the answers that help make your journey in autism easier and more navigatable. Less than a year ago, we interviewed the top 100 doctors in the United States working with children on the spectrum, and we asked them a question in the cloak of secrecy. What are the top 3 mistakes parents living with autism do? Number 1, and the one that makes me laugh the most, is when they use their physician as a marriage and family therapist. 1, the doctors told me it made them uncomfortable, and 2, they were highly unqualified to provide that type of advice. So the night before your physician appointment with your MAPS doctor, get together with your spouse, significant other, and write out the list of the targets and the agenda that you want to cover at the physician's appointment. Get in sync. Then you'll be definitely spending less time and not making that doctor so uncomfortable. Second thing that was the most common mistakes parents living with autism make is they want to go too fast. And really, you want to pace yourself in the autism journey. We all know that we want to get our kid to be the best they can be and hopefully recover from autism. And what a lot of the doctors have told me is that you want to really pace yourself. 1, to let the labs be your guide. And 2, work with your physician on the prioritization and the delivery of the different medical interventions. The third most common mistake they felt families made was giving up too soon. And what you need to know is they're invested. They're looking at wanting to get the best from your child. But I tell you that when I got that and consolidated the 100 interviews with these physicians, most of the doctors who brought that up had tears in their eyes. They want you to know that they're in the fight with you, and they want you to know that hope is really real. It may take hard work and it may take time, but to not give up and to stay in the game. So let TACA help you. We'll have some more TACA facts for you in the future, real questions and real answers for the autism journey.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We are joined right now by Bonnie Yates. She is a special education attorney. She's joining us on the phone. I think we're not able to do Skype right now. Is that what the deal is, Traven?
I am. Is it that you guys can?
I think that we cannot. I think that that's what's going.
Okay, that's fine.
Or
That's
do we think we can, Traven? Oh, have you got her on the Skype? We're figuring it out. Oh, he's trying to call you, but we had this problem.
Yeah, it should be fine.
Oh,
Should be fine.
now, maybe we should stop and start again.
No, here I am. Here I am.
Oh, she's there. She's there. It's all
Yeah,
good.
here. Hi.
And I think sometimes it's fun for people to see live what we do when we're not live. There's Bonnie.
Well, yes, that's
And
true. No,
it was
I'm still alive.
and it was worth the wait, Bonnie.
Notwithstanding.
You look beautiful.
Thank you, Shannon. So do you. You always look beautiful.
I'm trying today. I'm just trying. But anyway, I was saying before, Bonnie is a special education attorney with Jargon, and they are amazing. And Bonnie's going to tell us about Jargon, and then she's going to give us a disclaimer.
Yeah, so Jargon is a Culver City-based special education law firm. We do special education, regional center eligibility, disability discrimination, higher education, and maybe a few other things I can't even remember right now. If you want to contact us, you can reach us at 310-391-0330, and our website is www.lawyer4children.com.
Wonderful.
So that's where you can find us. When we do this program and we answer questions, we're not giving you legal advice. We're talking to you generally about your rights under various state and federal statutes and case law, but any specific problem that you have, you really need to take to an attorney in your own jurisdiction and have a focused conversation with that person, because general advice can't take the place of specific advice. So with that said, we've got some great questions again this week.
We do.
And I had them all up here, and where have they gone?
Shall I start reading the first one?
Yeah, you can read the first one.
Okay.
Thank you.
The first question is, I have 2 children in LAUSD. One has an IEP for autism and the other doesn't. Neither is up to date with their vaccinations, and I have no plans of changing that. My question, I am told that any day now they can send my kids home and ask them to stay at home until the measles issue is over or I vaccinate. Do they have to provide anything to my children while they are out of school, with the IEP and without it? Does the vaccine issue overrule FAPE? And we just talked about what FAPE was. That was our jargon term of the day.
Okay. So a lot of questions in that question. When Governor Brown signed the immunization bill in 2015, our office looked at it, and there's a blog about it at our website that goes more specifically into the ins and outs of the statute. The things I want to say about it are that in the course of writing that blog, first of all, at that time it was pretty clear that they weren't going to be able to ask you for immunization information until you were in 7th grade for kids that were already in school. I don't know for a fact, but it sounds as if now they're asking for them at the grade level, the lower grade level too, like maybe on kindergarten entry. What I learned when I did the research was that even though they were getting rid of the personal belief exemption, you could still opt out if you secured a medical exemption. What has happened since then is that some doctors have assisted parents in documenting a medical exemption and presenting it to the school district, and some students have been able to avoid the immunization requirements with the medical exemption. But more recently, I've also heard that some doctors were actually being investigated by their licensing board for providing the medical exemption without sufficient justification. So I don't know whether the effect of that has been to make doctors less likely to want to consider a medical exemption. I called the California Health Department and the state of California to find out how they were going to enforce the vaccine policy at the time. And what I was told was that the health department was going to defer to the state of California, and the state of California was going to defer to the individual district. And so there was some stuff floating around to the effect that you couldn't impose a vaccine exemption on students who had IEPs, and that you still had to provide FAPE for them, which is your listener's question.
Yeah.
So I asked California Department of Education about this, and they said, we're not going to tell the districts what to do. It's going to be up to the individual district. So I think that's probably what you're dealing with. So if you wanted a more specific understanding of your situation, you'd have to look at the district-specific policy, which I didn't do because, frankly, I'm just so short on time this week.
Yeah.
But if you want to look at the LAUSD policy and send in more questions, I can try to address it next week or something.
Okay. And even
complicated topic.
And even as we have this discussion, there is a big debate about, there is a bill that has been proposed that would eliminate the medical exemptions. So, all of this is very fluid, and I don't know that there is an answer to the question. So moving on. Can setting be determined by a one-time incident? My 5-year-old had a very bad reaction to an over-the-counter medicine. He had a meltdown in his kindergarten class and was throwing chairs. He has never done anything like this before or since. We think it was a reaction to the dye in the medicine, and we've even had our pediatrician say as much. But at the IEP the other day, they said they want to put him in a special day class because of behavior issues. There has only been that one time. We don't think this is the right choice for him, but they're afraid it will happen again. What does Bonnie think? We are in Wisconsin. He has an autism diagnosis, and there is an IEP. There was no BIP because he had never needed it.
Okay, well, I'm not licensed to practice in Wisconsin, but I think this is a general question that we can kind of reason our way through. I didn't hear that at the IEP meeting they said that he was having other behaviors that were disruptive. I only heard that you heard that there was this one instance. So if that's the case, it's not reasonable. Excuse me. I think what I would do is I would write them a letter and tell them that it's unfair and nobody would, in their right mind, penalize a child for having a reaction to a medication that he can't, have possibly known he was going to have or control. Attached to this letter is a letter from my pediatrician explaining the reason he had the behavior and that he hasn't had any reported behavior since the medication was discontinued. I would remind the school that I have the right to stay put, and that if the district won't honor his general education placement, I can hire an attorney, go to due process, and the placement will be maintained during the dispute per stay put. And so it's not going to work to go down this path they're going down. You'd rather work with them collaboratively. You think you need to reconvene the IEP team meeting to discuss whether there even is any behavior that might need to be the subject of a behavior support plan, that you don't think there is, but you're willing to listen. And you hope you can work it out with them collaboratively, but if you can't, you'll hire an attorney to maintain the placement. So that's my answer on that.
Wonderful. We're going to take a short break to fix an audio issue, and then we're going to come back with 2 more questions that you guys wrote in for Bonnie. So stick with us.
just go like this. Can you see me? Puedes mirarme aquí? Okay. Hi, I'm Rebecca Ishida. Say hi, Ethan. Hi. My son was diagnosed with autism in November 2004. With Ethan, almost immediately, we noticed things that were troublesome, that he just didn't sleep. He would vomit in the crib. There were a lot of sensory issues.
Then he'd have like 20 of the trains lined up, and if you came in and took one train out, just meltdown completely. Guttural instinct is to think that there's nothing wrong. Who wants to look at their child and go, there's something wrong with that child? You don't. You always want to see the best in your child.
Will my kid be able to go to school? Will he interact with his peers? Will he be able to have a healthy relationship? Will he get married? I really thought that autism was like a death sentence. A lot of hope was given to me through CARD. This was my third agency and the best agency we had. And there was no way in the world I was going to give up CARD because of the gains I saw Ethan was having.
Yeah, you did it!
And I remember when Doreen saw us for the evaluation, she says, but by the time he's 6, he will be recovered. And that's exactly what happened.
I'll fix that.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Hi there, I'm Lisa Ackerman. Welcome to the show. So the goal of today, we're going to make meatballs. Let's get started. So again, I'm going to take roughly a pound of my ground organic turkey, and I'm going to add in the secret vegetable. So if your kid doesn't like vegetables, don't cook in front of them, okay? Have them watch a movie or something. But you definitely want to make sure they're not watching, because then they won't eat it. So, and here we go with the egg. And our breadcrumbs. I'm just adding salt and pepper to taste. If you think about kids' shapes and sizes, you want to think small shapes, small hands. So your oven should be preheating at about 400 degrees. We're going to kick into the oven here and look at our meatballs. I did flip them halfway through the 20-odd minute. So we'll put, just like Julia Child's, there's our finished product right there. These are good. Cooking is easy. You don't have to be afraid of it. But we want to hear from you. If you can let us know what recipes are important to you, maybe convert a recipe from a traditional flour or gluten-based to a gluten-free or an allergy-free, we're here to help. So you get to us, you can email us at autismlive@gmail.com. You can reach out on Facebook at facebook.com/autismlive, or reach out at Taka Now. So I know you're having a great day. I had a lot of fun cooking with you in the kitchen, but I'll tell you, before we end, I gotta have more meatballs. Have a great day.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We are live with Bonnie Yates. She's special education attorney with the law firm of Hirji and Chow here in Southern California in Culver City. And Bonnie is answering your questions, just reminding all of you that Bonnie is answering them in a general nature, and if you need more support, you should find a lawyer or an advocate in your area. Bonnie, you like to recommend the COPA website, correct?
I do. COPAA.net is a nationwide directory of special education attorneys.
Wonderful. So Bonnie, our next question is, what do you do when you have a school psychologist who thinks she invented autism and she doesn't, right? And she doesn't agree with ABA. She told me all of the kids in the studies for ABA were misdiagnosed, and this mom says all of them. With a exclamation point. Fortunately, my son's teacher is great and wants to learn. The problem is the school psych keeps sticking her nose in. She's all about accountability and not positive reinforcement. I'd love it if I could get her off of my son's team.
You know, it's hard to do. I had a occupational therapist attack me after an IEP meeting, and she didn't like put her hands on me, but she got in my face and she threatened me. And I wrote a letter to the district about it, asked them to remove her from the IEP team, and it almost made them want to leave her on more. So I'm not really sure that you're going to be able to disqualify this school psychologist. You can write a letter and you can try and you can ask for another psychologist to be on the case instead. And you give your reasons why, because it is really offensive what she's saying, but they may not honor it, and so you may have to work around her. I don't know whether she did your child's annual or triennial evaluation. If she did, that's another reason they're going to want to hold on to her. If she hasn't, and maybe you've got a simpatico principal, you can get him to make the change. I think the way to deal with the teacher is to tell the teacher that you really appreciate her attitude, that she's open and willing to learn, and that there have been over the years different philosophies about autism, and feelings do run high, but the validated research is the Lovaas study and its subsequent kind of reiterations. And you can tell her that there's a lot of technical information available on the internet about, best practices. Here in California, the Regional Center did something in 2002. No, that was more about screening. I would buy your teacher a copy of Let Me Hear Your Voice. That's not a book I've talked about on this program. It's an old book. It's about how ABA works. It's a very compelling story, Let Me Hear Your Voice by Catherine Maurice. I'd probably give that to the teacher and tell her that it's a really good, compelling story. It explains a lot about autism. Maybe it's something she'd be willing to try reading in her spare time. Those of us that read it finished it in one day because, we were just sort of glued to the page. And then I might try to find one, if I could, like one definitive article or something on Google Scholar about autism and autism treatment. If you find something good, I wish I had something. I don't right now for you. I need to actually do some digging in that regard. But kind of like a meta-analysis or something. And you could just tell her, like, look, I respect the school psychologist. I know, even though you don't. And, she's had a lot of training, but reasonable minds could differ. And I've brought you stuff from some other really qualified people. All I'm asking you is to give my information, the same airplay that you're giving hers. And I think that's probably as good as it's going to get.
I will say, Bonnie, that a couple of years ago, because we had so many requests that, sometimes it was a family saying, I need to go and talk somebody in the school into using ABA, or sometimes it was dad saying mom isn't on board with ABA, or mom saying dad or ex-husband isn't on board, or my mother-in-law. We had so many requests that I had somebody pull like the 6 seminal studies that would sort of cover almost everything that somebody, like in general, that somebody would have to convince, like if you need to send it to your insurance company or, to your school or whatever. So I have those and can share those with anybody. And every card office, if you're close to a card office, they have a parent bulletin board where all of those are posted. But you can write to me for them if somebody needs a study to take. And there's 6 of them, and they cover about everything, including the difference between ABA and doing an ABA intervention or doing a school-based intervention. There's one of the studies that compares ABA school and the TEACH program.
That's great.
So just to say that we've got those.
You know what? I'm going to ask you to send those to me, because one of the things that I'm trying to do is introduce the newer lawyers in the office to what is autism. And it's kind of, compared to some of the other disabilities, it's kind of huge in terms of what's required to understand all the manifestations of autism, much less the treatment. So that sounds like a really handy thing that you've done. And I certainly would love to
We will get that off to you.
to look at it.
Veronica, if you're listening, send that to Bonnie now.
What was our theory? Send me those studies.
Okay.
What was our last question?
So our last question is, how much time am I allowed to look over the offer of FAPE? They are telling me if I don't sign within 10 business days, they are allowed to implement without
I love this one.
without my signature. Is that true?
Okay, liar, liar, your pants are on fire. It's not true.
Okay.
Here's the way it works. The district constructs an IEP that is supposed to contain, parental input. And sometimes you get the IEP back and there are, more like statistical errors or problems, and oftentimes it doesn't accurately reflect what the service offer is, and also it mischaracterizes the discussion. You are allowed to have time to review the IEP and respond to it. You are allowed to take a reasonable time. To me, that would be 30 days. I've been really bad in the last year when I've been busy, and sometimes I haven't done responses for 3 months afterwards. That's terrible. It's bad practice. It shouldn't happen. It's much harder to remember. But my point is, a district is only going to be able to file for due process against you and get a right to implement the IEP if you haven't responded in a reasonable time. And I would say you'd be well within your rights if you took 30 to 45 days to respond. And I think you could write them a letter that says, I'm reviewing the IEP, I am going to respond to you, I'll respond by X date, but as part of my deliberative process, I need to consider what changes I'm going to request to the IEP. Now, when you sign an IEP, they have a little box that says I consent or something like that. They don't exactly, and sometimes it says I consent to everything except. What they don't tell you is that you can consent to the implementation of the IEP, but you can object to eligibility, unique needs, goals, services in part or whole, but you can say, I don't think your behavior services offer is FAPE because I think he needs a 1-to-1 aid, not a 3-to-1 aid, but I'll consent for purposes of implementation. And so that's you can protect yourself in that way. You can give them permission to implement some or all of it. There's a California statute that basically says, and this is California only, it's not federal, if the parent, doesn't believe certain portions of the IEP are appropriate to provide a FAPE, they don't have to consent to those parts, and the district can implement the rest. And then it says that the district, if it feels that partial implementation of the IEP is not sufficient to provide a FAPE, then they can file for an order to implement the whole IEP. I've done partial consents for years. I've never had a district object to a partial consent in that way. So they're giving you misinformation. Typically, like lawyer to lawyer, if we haven't signed an IEP and the time is getting kind of long, oftentimes the other lawyer will write me a question and say, hey, do you intend to respond or sign the IEP? And that's kind of my little first warning that they need me to do something, because at some point they are going to, have to either get you to consent to implementation but not concede FAPE, or they're going to have you do something, because they're concerned that if the state comes down and looks at the IEP and sees that it's out there and it's not being implemented, they're going to be concerned about that, and they're going to come down on the district. But this 10 days stuff,
it's crazy.
Makes me want to stand on my head or something.
Absolutely.
Because it's really not accurate, and it's really unfortunate when people are being aggressive with parents and they're lying to parents. Like, doesn't everybody remember from religious school when they were kids, it's bad to lie? We shouldn't be lying. We shouldn't be lying to parents who have kids with disabilities or are working really hard to try to educate their kids, so.
Well, and often I think how they justify it, Bonnie, is that they'll say, this is our policy, that we like to have it done 10 days. And the thing that I've seen as a parent is that they'll provide me with some random rule that they came up with because they're trying to be productive. And I like to remind them, I'm sure that that's your rule, but that's not my rule. That's not a rule that I have to follow. That's your internal rule. Thank you for making that rule for yourselves. It doesn't involve
but
me.
Shannon, they can have policies, but they can't have policies that contravene people's rights under IDEA.
That's
and
the
I
thing.
think this policy is in that category.
Absolutely. Bonnie, I always love the sense and the common sense that you bring to things, and it's aptly named your rights, so that we have the opportunity to know what our rights are. I appreciate you so much being here, and I apologize because we got to you a little bit late today.
No.
But
someday we're going to talk about least restrictive environment, but apparently today is not the day.
Well, do you want to talk about do you have more time today?
Well, let me at least start on it so I can get people's feet wet.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
I'm just going to start with a definition of least restrictive environment. And I mean, the reason I want to talk about least restrictive environment is I think that the general shared impression among attorneys, at least in California, that do special education, is that if it's at all possible for your child with autism to be fully included in general education, that's what you're going to want to strive for. You're going to want to strive for appropriate supports, of course, but least restrictive environment in order to be able to have your child be exposed to normal language, normal peer modeling, normal curriculum, normal activities. So for that reason, understanding how the law works with respect to least restrictive environment is important. Now, I don't want to make people feel like if their child is in a special ed class that this discussion has nothing for them. Least restrictive environment is not a place. Least restrictive environment often is general ed, but often it can also be something else. And so for parents whose kids are in a special day class, or parents whose kids are in the hospital, or parents whose kids are medically fragile and they're receiving services at home, it's still important to understand what LRE, least restrictive environment, is. Okay, so that's why we're going to talk about it. We feel like in any setting that you're in, it's going to be important for you to be asking whether the environment can be modified in any way to make it more inclusive for your child. So I'm just going to start with the definition of what least restrictive environment is, and I'm going to read it. Least restrictive environment is the requirement in federal law that students with disabilities receive their education to the maximum extent appropriate with non-disabled peers, and that special education students are not removed from regular classes, even with supplemental aids and services. Unless, even with supplemental aids and services, education in regular classes cannot be achieved satisfactorily. So for a person that's in general ed and the district is proposing to move him out of general ed and into a special day class, to me, the discussion item for the IEP meeting, the first discussion item is, well, what about supplemental aids and services, and who can present information about the student about how supplemental aids and services have been the reason he's been able to participate in the past, and so on. And so you can see how the analysis would also apply to somebody who isn't in general ed full-time, but might be, let's say, mainstream for part of his school day as well. So there are a lot of terms that people throw around in discussing least restrictive environment. You'll hear people talk about mainstreaming, you'll hear people talking about integration, you'll hear people talking about full inclusion, and you'll hear people talking about reverse mainstreaming. So those terms do not really have a legal meaning, and sometimes they're used in different ways by different people, but I at least thought I would throw out for consideration what I think those things mean or may mean. So mainstreaming, as I understand it, is taking somebody who has an IEP and needs special education and related services, but including him in a less restrictive setting, which could be a different kind of special day class. It could be like a resource classroom or something, or it could be the general ed environment. But the notion is that for some part of his day, but not his whole day, he's going to be in a different environment other than his special education general placement that he's in. Integration is kind of also a term that's used for a lot of different things. I think it generally just means including somebody in some level or at some level into mainstream or general education opportunities. And those could be like the extracurricular opportunities that schools have for music, for PE, for after-school clubs, for any other non-academic school subject, you could be integrated in some degree into those classes. Full inclusion, to me, sort of is like the same thing as mainstreaming, except for that full inclusion means that you're going to be, you have an IEP, you have a disability, but you're going to be in the general education classroom for 100% of the school day. And you have seen on your IEP where it says, it will say percentage of the day that the student is going to be outside of general ed, and they're supposed to write a percentage, and that percentage sort of reflects the ratio of how much you're included versus how much you're in your special day class. Reverse mainstreaming means, well, it means a couple of things, but one of the things it means is you take students that are not disabled and you bring them into the special education classroom so that all of those people, all of those children or peers can socialize. The thing about reverse mainstreaming or any mainstreaming that's really important is it requires a knowledge of how to do full inclusion or mainstreaming, and it's more than just bringing a bunch of kids together and, telling them, okay, now go play. It's not going to work that way. If you really want to do reverse mainstreaming or you want to do inclusion for students with IEPs, with more non-disabled peers, you got to have a roadmap about how you're going to do it, so it does require some training. But those are the terms that we run into that are used to discuss different ways of ensuring that people are entitled to the mandate of least restrictive environment. So I think I'm going to stop here and I'm going to pick it up next week, but we're going to have a rather lengthy discussion about all the opportunities that exist for students to be mainstreamed and how you can use supplementary aids and services to access least restrictive environment, oftentimes the general ed curriculum. So that's some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about because I think it's really important for all of us to know what our options are.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, and I'm glad we took a minute to do that. As always, you teach us things that we did not know before. So thank you, because this is important stuff. And I thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And so tell them a little bit about Jargon Chow again.
Jargon Chow. Okay, Jargon Chow, if you live in Southern California and you want a complimentary intake, you can call us 310-391-0330. We have a lot of stuff up at our website that's interesting for you to look at, including that article on vaccine exemptions, although it's not really current. The website is www.lawyer4, so lawyer4children.com. Again, I'm really pleased at the quality and the depth of the questions. You're making me have to think. That's a good thing for my aging brain. Everybody have a good week, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. We really appreciate you. All right. Bye-bye. So that was Bonnie Yates, amazing special education attorney. We're going to take a break and then come back for our mindfulness moment, so stick with us. Parent to parent, having a compliant child is one of the greatest things on earth. But frequently we ask ourselves, why doesn't my child listen? Well, here are some tips to help us to get a listening, happy, compliant child. First, we want to make sure that we make compliance worthwhile. Whenever your child does something that's compliant, make sure that you praise them and heap rewards on them that are meaningful to them, things they really want. One of the things that we have to be mindful of is that if the child isn't compliant, we have to praise more often. Just heap it on. If you say to yourself, there's nothing to praise, they're not doing anything that I want them to do, then ask them to do something that they already want to do. This is a really tricky way of being able to praise them. And then, of course, the last thing that we want to do is catch them doing good things when they least suspect it. And make sure you heap that praise on, because having a compliant child is one of the best things in life. Token economies are a great way to get to good behavior with your child.
Hi, I'm Lisa Ackerman. Welcome back to another Talk of Fact. we bring you the most common questions and share those answers that help your journey along for you and your family. One of the most common questions we hear all the time is, why are these doctors working with kids on the autism spectrum so expensive? Well, there's a simple answer. Kids with autism take more time, and unfortunately, if you look at a regular pediatrician's practice, they may see anywhere from 30 to 60 patients every day. So you may get at most 3 to 5 minutes with those doctors. With doctors that specialize in autism, they're called MAPS doctors, the Medical Academy of Pediatric Special Needs. They spend quite more time with each family and each patient. And that could be an hour to an hour and a half for each family that is actually being spent just talking about your child, looking at labs. So why are they more expensive? Well, your pediatrician probably gets paid a lot more per hour based on the number of people they see. A MedMaps doctor is solely dedicated to what you're doing and what your child needs. So look at it this way. If you're spending time with your MedMaps doc and you're working with that doc, and you will literally on average see somewhere between 4 to 7 hours per year. And then don't forget that other fact we talked about, how to get the best possible healthcare reimbursement, so you can make sure that that time is well spent, not only getting answers, but also reimbursed by health insurance. So there, another very detailed long fact from Talk of Facts.
We've got just enough time to do a mindfulness moment, and we talked at the beginning of the show about the idea of living your priorities. And the first part of that is knowing what your priorities are. And sometimes people say to me, I don't even know what my priority is. And one of the things that we often talk about meditation and creative visualization on the show, and this is a great opportunity to mention creative visualization, because if you're not sure what you want, sitting quietly, starting with 3 slow inhales and 3 slow exhales, is a great way to get yourself centered, right? That's the very minimum of what we all want to be doing on a regular basis. Boy, if you can start doing that once a day and then start doing it 3 times a day, and maybe even finding the opportunity to do it once an hour, just 3 inhales and 3 exhales, right? That's a great place to start. But after that, one of the things that my husband and I found to be really effective when we were figuring out our priorities and how we were going to get through early intensive autism intervention, of course, I've talked before about how we made a manifesto for ourselves and listed what we thought was important. But as things rolled around, like stuff would come that would question that. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing when you're questioning your list of priorities and going, is that really what I want? Don't think that that's a failure to have made your manifesto properly. Think of that as, wow, I'm really looking at what's important to me, because that's the truth. And you can adjust the manifesto, right? And asking those questions is really important. But one of the things that we would try to do on a regular basis, we had what we called our money mantra, which were a series of stretches that our doctors had both asked us to do. And we would each come up with a positive money phrase that we would say while we were doing the stretches. And we would do it at the same time in the living room together, but at opposite ends of the living room. So he'd be at one end of the couch and I was at the other end. And we would be doing the stretches, saying our money mantra, which we found to be very made me feel better. It made me stress less about money. I don't know that it brought more money in, but it made me stress about it less. And really, that is the ticket, right? But then we would take just 2 minutes afterwards and we would sit on the floor, and we chose to do it holding hands. You don't have to do it with another person, but we found this to be really effective as a couple. And we would just close our eyes and allow our mind to visualize the future and to see what we could see. And it's like sort of playing a dream movie in your head. Excuse me. We tried not to steer it any one particular way, but to sort of envision a future in which we were happy. And what did it look like? And then we would open our eyes a minute. I'm talking a minute. I wish we'd done it 20 minutes, but we didn't. But we would open our eyes and tell each other what we saw. And that helped us to formulate what was important to us. that like we could visualize ourselves being in a place where we were happy and safe. And, you know, for me, like it was very specific about, you know, what did it look like? Like, you know, what was the decor is what I'm saying, which is sort of a silly thing, but that's how I visualize things. And for my husband, it was more specific about things that were happening and things that we were doing. And, you know, so it's very interesting how we would visualize those things. But I have to tell you that then led to us having a conversation, and there were things that I got my husband to say as a result of that about things that were important to him. And there were things that I said to him that maybe I was keeping squished in, because it's like at a certain point when you've got a lot of stuff going on, it doesn't feel right to dream. And it's so important to dream, because dreams inform what can be. When you walk down the sidewalk and you see every single building and every single vehicle and every single person, there was a time when those things and people did not exist, and they were part of somebody's dream. Somebody said, I want to build that apartment building. And they had to do a lot of things to get there, but it started with a dream, right? And, you know, building an apartment building, not my dream, but it certainly was somebody's, right? And when you look at the world that way, you go, wow, there have been a lot of people dreaming and taking action here, right? That bicycle didn't exist until somebody dreamed that, oh, you know, I want to make it this way and make it this color, and, you know, and here it is. So sitting and dreaming and then talking about it, so great for a relationship, so great for your stomach lining. But then you can think, okay, what on that list am I willing to work towards? What's the most important, and what's the most important to us as a couple if you're doing it with another person? And then saying, hey, are we doing that? Are we working towards that? I have to say that it really, the best things in my life have been because of those kinds of moments, a minute a day. And those are the things that we have pursued. There's a whole lot of other stuff that we didn't pay attention to and we didn't get to. And sometimes I mourn that and I go, yeah, but we didn't look at it in the moment. It wasn't as important as the other stuff, right? And then I can stop worrying about it. So I encourage you to use your mindfulness moment to sit by yourself or with someone else and dream for a minute. Got to be in a centered place first, so that breath has to be happening, long, slow inhales. And, you know, if you're somebody who doesn't have a great attention span, a minute, and see if that leads you to figuring out really what's important. In the time that I have here on this planet, what's important to me? And you can think of it long term or you can think of it short term. What's important to me this year? And if that truly is the thing that's important, am I living my life in a way to make that happen? That's some good stuff, y'all. Honestly, it's a powerful, powerful thing. So try that. It should be, for me, I can't speak for everybody else, but for me, I know I'm on the right track when it makes me feel peaceful, not anxious. There are times when I'm like, well, I should be doing this. And I feel like, I don't want to do that, right? Or, oh, that makes me nervous. When I find something that I'm like, oh man, that's the thing I want to do. I really, really want to do it. And I feel a certain amount of peace with it. Boy, that's the thing, right? And that leads to the creating happiness, which we also talk about. All right. We're totally out of time, and I really appreciate you guys being with me. We've got a big week this week. We're going to finish out this April Autism Awareness Month strong, so make sure that you're with us all this week, but we got to sign off, so I'll see you back here tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.